Can you put in the chat any other countries? Spain, hi there. Dominican Republic, okay, good. Wonderful beaches. Poland, yeah. Sweden, good. Canada, great. Quite early for you guys in Canada. Nicaragua, excellent, good. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to talk about creativity today. And what I think I will do is to start showing my screen with a little slideshow here. So hold on a moment while we do that. I hope you can all see that.
Yes, we can see it perfectly.
Excellent, okay. And now I just need to adjust. And there we go. Okay, great. Good. Power of creativity. Well, the world's moving so fast, and the ideas that worked yesterday, they don't work today. There's a constant pressure of good ideas. Well, there always is in business, any kind of business, but now you need them quicker. And the ability to create new ideas becomes just as important as the ideas themselves. And, you know, what with competition and lots of copying going on anyway, the competitive advantage now is not really necessarily having the best idea, because it's going to get caught up. But being able to generate a series of good ideas that's going to keep you ahead. So this is why I'm talking about this, because I think this power of creativity, being able to create new ideas, is becoming more and more important in the whole of our life, in whatever area you look at. Okay, so I'm just going to, what I want to do is talk a little bit in general about creativity, some ideas about it, give you some specific creative strategies, and then tell you about an initiative that I'm making at the moment in order to, I don't know, add to the world's creativity as much as I can. So is that okay? All good? And I hope you can hear me all right and see me okay. Just put a thumbs up in the chat if that's all cool.
Yes, we can see it perfectly and hear you well.
Okay, jolly good. Excellent, good, thank you. Always good to know on these type of webinars, you can end up talking for 10 minutes before you realize that nobody can hear you. All right. So, well, what is creativity then? We all want it. I never met anyone who didn't want to be more creative. But then, you know, how do you get it? How do you become more creative? This is the question. And part of the difficulty is sometimes in the way that we think about it, because creativity isn't an it. It's not something that you can just grab onto and you know, incorporate and yes, I'm creative. It's a process. It's a process that runs when the right pieces are in place. It's not something you can just go out and grab. And I think when the right processes are in place, you can't stop it. And I'm sure everyone here has had an experience where things have just been right. You know, you're feeling good, you're the right person in the right place at the right time, and you get this idea, this great idea. And then maybe you talk about it with other people and it really works. It's a really good idea. Maybe you never do anything with it, but it's a good idea. You know it is. And you've been creative. That process has happened. And I think we're all naturally creative, given the right opportunity. So it's not some magic power that's possessed only by a lucky few people. It's something that we are all able to do. Sometimes in particular areas, sometimes more generally. We're familiar with, artistic creativity, writing, painting, visual arts, but it's more than that. Okay. So let's have some kind of working definition of what we're talking about. So it's something new. It is a new idea. There is some kind of novelty there, but it's made usually from elements from another context. It's things taken from different contexts and put together to make something new. It's very, very rare that you get, maybe it's impossible, that you get a completely new idea, never been thought of in the whole of history before. But what you get is a combination of ideas put together in a particular way that makes something new. And, whether you talk about something like an aeroplane or a computer or a painting or a musical piece, these are all things that were made from pre-existing elements, and they were put together into something new. There's only 12 tones in musical scale, after all, in Western music, but the amount of creativity and different new songs and music that you can make out of those 12 tones is just infinite. So I like that quote from Pablo Picasso. He says, good artists borrow, great artists steal. I think he had a tongue in cheek, but what he's saying basically is that great artists don't just create something out of nothing. They use what's there. And then, of course, it fits perfectly into the new context. It's got to work. Otherwise, people don't do it. Why bother? So it's something new that fits perfectly, that's appropriate, that works, is useful in some kind of way. If it's technology, it's got to work. It's got to meet a need. If it's a machine, it's got to work. If it's music, then it's got to appeal to people, or painting, or any of the arts. So that's how those would be the two things I'd say about creativity. And then it's like, well, okay, how do we do this thing? How are we creative? And I'm thinking about it rather like spontaneity, that when you try to be creative, the very trying, the very effort makes it difficult. And again, I'm sure you've all had an experience where you really you really feel you need to come up with something new, some idea, and you really think hard, and it doesn't come. And so then, okay, maybe you give up, and maybe you go for a walk, or have a shower, or do something completely different. And then suddenly, there's the idea. It was kind of hiding, and it was waiting for a time when it could come into your mind. The ancient Greeks had this idea of muses, of inspiration coming from the gods. It wasn't you at all. It was like the gods giving you inspiration, but you had to be ready to receive it. Otherwise it wouldn't come. So in the same way, I think it's about making ourselves available so that those creative ideas can come to us. And in that sense, it's really not standing in the way, not blocking ourselves, rather than trying to do anything more proactively. Okay. So it's a bit like a shy friend, you've got to kind of invite in and make your house comfortable for them. So you can't try and be spontaneous, because the trying will stop you. You can't really try to be creative, because again, the trying is going to stop you. I'm very interested in neuroscience, as some of you probably know. You've maybe taken some courses with me or a webinar or heard about this. I'm involved in something called Coaching the Brain, Neuroscience and Coaching. So I'm very interested in how the brain works. And the brain is incredibly creative. It's naturally creative. And I just want to start by looking a little bit at the brain in terms of what is creative and what isn't creative. Because I think we have this idea that we just kind of have to chill out and think of nothing, and then these ideas will come. But it's not quite so simple as that if you look at the brain in more detail. We all have this series of circuits in the brain called the default mode network, or DMN as it's known. And the default mode network, as you might expect, is those circuits of the brain that are kind of, when you're not doing anything very much, they're always on. So, you know, when you're chilling, when you're daydreaming, when you're thinking of nothing in particular, it's likely that your default mode network has been engaged. Now, this may sound good for creativity, but I don't think it is, because the default mode network is, well, it's certainly linked with depression for a start, and it's almost the opposite of focus and attention that you're going to need. So the default mode network's made up of parts of the brain that are active when you're doing nothing, when you're chilling, when you're daydreaming, and includes different parts of the brain you can see in this scan. And when this is engaged, actually, we're not usually thinking of nothing. We're thinking of ourselves, our past triumphs, our failures, our daydreams, our ambitions, our real and imagined conflicts, daydreams, nightmares. It's all about us. There's nothing wrong in that. It's not a place where creative ideas are going to come. And it doesn't engage any of those parts of the brain that are involved in goal-directed action, focused action. That takes you off the default mode network. Also, the default mode network's all about you. And when you start thinking of other people and engaging with other people, again, you come off the default mode network. So I think the default mode network is in one sense an enemy of creativity if we get too much into it. So we want to have some way perhaps to weaken the default mode network. And indeed, there is one practice that does this. And that is a meditation or mindfulness practice. So meditating or doing some kind of mindfulness exercise is not just thinking of nothing. It's focusing on what's there. You're not kind of focused in on yourself. There's been a lot of neuroscientific research with meditators, and it shows that the activity of the default mode network is suppressed, and also it comes more into sync with other networks that are associated with attention and executive control in the prefrontal cortex here. So it's certainly looking from the neuroscience research that meditation practice gives you a greater ability to maintain attention and less time in mind wandering. So this is something I just put for your attention. I do think that it's very beneficial to have some kind of consistent meditation, mindfulness practice. It has many, many benefits that have been well proven in neuroscience research. And this happens to be one of them. Weakens the default mode network, gives you more in sync with focus, and action and attention. So I just put that out, which might mean that if you're thinking about being creative, don't just let your mind daydream, but actually go into some kind of mindfulness practice, because that will it'll settle the mind. It's a bit like a snow globe. If you've ever seen those snow globes, maybe if you're in a country that doesn't have snow, but in England, it's kind of like a glass globe, and inside there's like a little model houses and trees, like Christmas. And then there's this kind of like snow, and it's suspended in water inside, so you shake it, and then all the little flakes of white start to go over the scene, and then they start to settle down like snow. And that's a bit like our mind. You know, our mind is being shaken up all the time by all sorts of things, the events and anxieties and what happens to us. And some kind of meditation, mindfulness, just lets that settle down so that it's clearer, so you can see the little village inside. Of course, the world will come and shake us up again, but maybe the next time it'll come to rest a little bit quicker. So there's no eureka moments from the default mode network. Those kind of inspiration that we get sometimes, creativity, inspiration, moments of insight, it seems like, as far as the brain's concerned, the activity slows down first and then spikes. That's what seems to happen when we have these moments of insight in the brain. So first of all, you want it to settle down, gives it a chance to spike. So that's one thing, I think, that helps us get out of our way to be more creative. So what else? Well, again, on the same idea, we need to be less, we need to inhibit, to stop the distractions. If we take the idea that we are naturally creative, then what's stopping us, we need to inhibit that, we need to stop that. And this will allow that power to come out more naturally. So, what do we need to inhibit? We need to inhibit distractions that are internal and distractions that are external. So those internal distractions, of course, you know, we want to be comfortable. We don't want to be hungry. We don't want to be tired or upset. Having a kind of comfortable, easy internal environment is going to help that creativity, those creative juices to flow. On the outside, again, an external, the environment, something beautiful, something that you enjoy being. You know, many people are more creative out in nature, for example. They want to go to somewhere that's beautiful in nature, or if you have your study or your room, make sure that it's an environment that you enjoy, that it feels good to be there, that you don't have to, that you're not looking around all the time thinking, oh my God, it's a mess, I need to clean that up, or I really wish I could repaint that wall or change that picture, or this chair isn't very comfortable. All of those things are distractions, and you don't really want those. So pay attention to your environment. It does affect our thinking and our ability to think. It's not all about what happens inside our brain. If you are feeling emotional, you know, if you're feeling anxious, sad, happy, that's okay. Don't try to stop that, because you can't inhibit emotions in the same way. If you try to push down, repress, stop emotions, they tend to get stronger, tend to well up more strongly. So if you do have emotion, particularly like anxiety or sadness, let it settle first. Don't try and push it down in an attempt to get on with things. Doesn't usually work. So then there's two things here really to be more creative. One is to consciously arrange your environment that you feel comfortable and good in it. Could be your study, or it could just be finding a place outside, going for a walk, as many people do. And then the second thing, of course, is to make sure that internally you are feeling as good as possible. Now, you can practice inhibition. You can get better at keeping things, having a more of a calm, being able to be more calm. And I say this because I'm thinking of something that I used to do. Because some of you may know I was a professional guitarist, and I used to give concerts with classical guitar. I did play electric, but it was mostly classical. So I used to practice the guitar for concerts. Now, of course, when you give a public concert, it is a much more stressful environment, or it can be stressful. And anyone who performs in public, whether it's music or art or just giving presentations, it can invoke stress. So you want to be ready for that. And as far as possible, you want to be able to ignore it, push it down, not be distracted by it. So what I used to do when I was practicing the guitar, just in my own study, was that I used to practice with the radio on, for example, which of course was a big distraction. And by practicing with the radio on, I got very good at tuning out other sounds. I used to practice, sometimes I used to get a friend to kind of talk to me at the same time while I was practicing. So you can see the idea here is to deliberately distract yourself in order to practice for a time when you will be there'll be more possible distractions, but you can't prepare for them because you don't know exactly what they are. Now, I'm giving an example of giving a concert, but if you have an important presentation to give, you might want to practice in the same sort of way. You may want to practice the presentation with a couple of friends who ask them to ask difficult questions or to heckle you. So you're ready. You may not, it may go fine, you may not get a lot of distractions. People may be fine, and hopefully they are, but you're ready for it if they're not. It just reminds me, I think it was in the Olympic Games where I heard there are some countries that were particularly unpopular, well, some athletes that were particularly unpopular. And they used to prepare for the Olympic Games in their own country by doing whatever it was, the running or the jumping or weightlifting or whatever it was. And they used to have recordings of people shouting and booing, because that's what could happen in the actual time. And indeed it did. And by practicing with it, they got very good then at just tuning it out. They were ready for it. It didn't put them off. So there's quite a few things you can do there. Just put that idea out as an interesting tip for being able to inhibit distractions. What else? Oh yeah, well, I talked a bit about the environment. Make it as comfortable, as beautiful and undisturbed as you like and as suits you. Another thing about the brain is that the brain can suffer from what's called decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is if you make a lot of decisions, as many business people do, of course, all day, you get less and less good at making them. You get tired, literally, your brain gets tired, so that the quality of the decisions that you make later in the day, or before a break, are usually worse than the ones you make just after a break or at the beginning of the day. And this is quite a well-known phenomenon that's been well proved in neuroscience research. In practical terms, if you ever want to go to the doctor or therapist or coach or anyone like that, see if you can get one of the first appointments. Don't go just before lunch, and certainly don't go at the end of the day. That's not to say that the doctor or therapist is bad. It's simply that it's tiring. It's tiring doing these things, and quality of decision tends to go down. So what, in terms again of helping yourself with this, make sure that you give yourself plenty of breaks, and don't sweat the small stuff. Don't concern yourself with decisions that you don't have to make. And there's plenty of stories like that from well-known people. Steve Jobs, for example, and always used to appear for his presentations in the same clothes, right? He had the black polo neck and the jeans. He never had to think about, what shall I wear for this presentation? It was just, that's what I'm going to wear. That's what I wear every time. That's what I'm going to wear. It was a decision he didn't have to make. And you'll find that top people will make sure that they never have to make those sort of less important decisions if they can automate them in advance. I'm sure that many politicians do this, but I remember President Obama, he had 2 suits, and the only choice he had to make was which suit to wear in the morning. It wasn't like, oh, so much to think about. So watch out for decision fatigue. Make sure you have enough breaks, and don't make a lot of decisions, important decisions, and then think that you can be creative, because it's much harder. Okay, what else? Still on the idea of what can stop you being creative. Well, here's some ideas that will stop you being creative. If you think there's only one right way to do it, that'll certainly stop you being creative, because you'll search for that one right way and you'll worry about whether you've got it or not. And creativity doesn't answer puzzles. If you're going to solve a maths problem, that does have a right answer, but we're not talking about that here. We're talking about much more complex things that we need to do. Another idea, it must be perfect. You can't make any mistakes. No, if you're afraid of making mistakes, then you probably won't take any risks. And if you don't take any risks, then you probably won't be very creative, because something new is always a risk, always. It reminds me again of a story I heard about a group of people who used to make up music, and they were famous for the music that they would make up. And the way that they used to do it was that they would play the same tune, but someone would make a mistake. And then if the mistake was interesting, so they created by mistakes, which is an interesting way of thinking about it. And I certainly know that many big companies have a particular department where people are just told, go in there and try whatever you like, make as many mistakes as you like, and hopefully you're going to come up with something good. But if you don't, it's okay. Just go in there and try things out. And they make a whole department of that, away from the rest of it, that kind of compartmentalize that. So don't be afraid of mistakes. The trick is not to make the same mistake twice. First time is fine, it can be good, but the same mistake second time, not so good. Only special people are creative is another idea. No, everybody's creative. Many people think that creativity is making something completely new. No, anyone can make something completely new. But is it interesting? Is it beautiful? Do people want it? Does it fit? That's the thing. No ambiguity or uncertainty. Well, there's always ambiguity and uncertainty. You know, we're in so-called VUCA times, aren't we? V-U-C-A, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and I think it's ambiguity. So these are around us anyway, all the time. And it's precisely in those areas where things aren't certain that creativity will come. You don't have to know everything. It's just like, I know many of you will be coaches, and of course, as coaches, you don't need to be an expert in the business of your client. In fact, not being an expert is an advantage, because you can ask those simple, maybe what seem like stupid questions that are very basic, that somebody who knew a lot about it wouldn't be asking because they thought they knew the answer. But these very basic questions can make people think about things in a whole new different way. And that's what we want to do as coaches. And then the last idea here, what worked in the past is good enough. And maybe it is. But if you want to be creative, then assume that there's something better. And that reference at the end there to Leonardo da Vinci, the famous Renaissance artist and inventor, he had this strategy of, when he was given a project, a problem to solve, he would never be content with the first answer that he got. He would always aim for 3. He'd always try to get 3 solutions to the problems that he was presented with. Very often the first one was fine, and sometimes he'd go for the first one, but he'd always try to get another 2, just in case. Because it's worth remembering that the first answer that we tend to come up with tend to be based on our habitual thinking in the past. And that's why it comes up first. It's easy. But you've got to push past that. And that's worth doing. Not all the time, of course, but in those particular puzzles and difficulties and problems where it's important really to be creative. Okay, let's move on. If you see me kind of doing this, this is because there's a very annoying fly buzzing around me. Right. So creative strategies. Here's another creative strategy I like. Study something new. I'm sure that you all have something that you said to yourself at one stage, I'd really like to do that. I'd really like to study that, but I haven't got time. You know, could be anything. It could be, I don't know, nuclear physics, quantum theory, photography, oil painting, Aikido. Doesn't matter. It's something that you find interesting and you'd like to really look at it in more detail and learn something about it, but you haven't. I would say do it. It will bring a new set, a new perspective, a new set of ideas in, a new way of looking at things. And this is going to help you, because it'll help you bring the same kind of mindset to other things that you do. So I'm not saying that you're going to be creative in this new study, but simply that the new study will introduce new ideas, new ways of looking at things, new mindsets that you can add, as it were, to your creative toolbox and have a greater ability in the areas where you want to be creative. So that's something that I would heartily recommend, and it's something that I ask my executive clients to do. Here's another strategy. One of the problems of being creative is coming up with something new. And because our brains run with habitual ideas, and of course we're creatures of habits, we do things over and over again and they work, it's hard to break out of that. It's kind of hard to deliberately think of something new. It's a bit like trying to pull yourself off the ground with your own bootlaces. Lift yourself off the ground by getting your fingers underneath your feet and lifting up. You can't do it because it's part of the same system. So how do you trick the brain? You trick yourself into getting some new idea. Well, the answer is random. Do something random. Take something random. So this, for dice, that introduces something random. What I do is I take a book. It can be any book. Take a book that you like. Can be, can be the Bible or any Upanishads, Quran, whatever you like. And you have a particular problem, right? So you do it with a particular problem in mind. And then what you do is you take this book and you open it at a random page and close your eyes, put your finger onto a line on the page, and then open your eyes and just read what's there. That paragraph or that sentence, whatever it is. Because that is something random. It's an element coming in. There's no way that you could predict what that was. And what's really interesting is that for our brain, everything has meaning. We have to make meaning. We have to try to connect things. That's what we do. So you look at this sentence, and by thinking, how does this connect with my problem? It's quite amazing how that can give you an idea that you hadn't thought of before in terms of that problem. That's one way that you can introduce a random element. And it's quite a nice way. And many people do it. Pick your favorite book, but don't pick one that you know very, very, very well. But pick one that is interesting for you. So that's another very practical idea in terms of how can you stimulate yourself to be more creative by removing the difficulties. Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit on, you might have been thinking that when I'm talking about creativity, often we might be able to substitute something like intuition, where we get an idea, an answer, just out of the blue, but it seems to fit. So I think creativity and intuition are very similar in many ways. But the same as creativity, with intuition, you need to prepare the ground. Most of intuition comes from our implicit learning, not about things that we try to learn or academic learning, but just simply life, just going through life and having experiences. That's our implicit learning. So if you want to be intuitive or creative in a particular area, then you want to be familiar with that area. So if you want to, if you want to be a more intuitive coach, more creative coach, then you need plenty of input. You need plenty of practice. It's very hard to be intuitive if you know nothing about the area that you want to be intuitive about. So you practice. And you get feedback as well on the idea. So this is why that feedback in terms of creativity, we can all have these amazing ideas, but we need feedback, and we need good quality feedback from people that we trust, or a lot of people, or even better, a lot of people that we trust. And this helps us then to get that feedback about what we've created, what we've intuited, and helps to sharpen that creativity and intuition for the next time. And one final thing, don't wait to feel creative before you start to do something. Start to do things, and that creativity will flow. And I like the phrase that says you've got to jump off the cliff and you build your wings on the way down. You've got to kind of commit to that to start with. And as some of you may know, I do a lot of writing, and this is particularly true of writing. If you wait around for when you feel creative to write your book, you'll probably never start. But jump in, have a blank piece of paper, blank screen, start it, and it's amazing the ideas that come. You've got to open the tap, it's like having a closed tap and then thinking, well, I wish this water would flow. It doesn't. You've got to open the tap and then it'll flow. Okay, briefly, I just want to give you a couple of things that I'm interested in that you may be interested in as well. I want to start a community, a creative community of people who can support each other in creative ideas and resources. So we'll have both resources and also support, and I've named it MASTER, just because it's good to have an acronym there. Mindset, creative mindset, application, stimulation, encouragement, and results. And I'm going to start this probably in a couple of weeks' time, 2-3 weeks. So if you're interested in that kind of, I'm calling it the Creators Club, of joining with people, I'm going to start it. I'm going to be there. I'm going to start it up with lots of ideas and resources, and with lots of support. If you'd like to hear about when I launch this, which will be in a couple of weeks, please join the waiting list. You can see the link there. Okay, or you can email me at that email address. So I guess all of you are interested in creativity, so I wanted to put that out there. I'll leave that up on the screen for a few minutes, and we do have just 5-10 minutes at the end for any comments or questions. So let's go from that. I'll take a look at the chat and I'll look at the questions and answers, and maybe Alexis can help me as well.
There are really no questions or comments in the chat per se. Let's see if, well, let's take this space to invite everyone to ask their questions. I see one in the Q&A. Yes, there's a question in the Q&A. Can you see it? It's rather long.
Yes, I'm just reading it now. It's an interesting question. I just say a couple of things. One is that the word trust, how do you create trust with a difficult issue? The word trust comes from an old word that means support. So in the sense that if you trust something or someone, it means that you trust that it will support you. It won't let you down. So if I trust this chair that I'm sitting on, I will give it my full weight, and I trust that it's not going to collapse. So I think trust is about, it's very difficult to trust something without knowing it first. Or if you don't know it directly first, you're going to have a number of people say, you know, I've tried this chair, or I know this chair, and you can trust it, it's not going to let you down. And of course, it's obvious with people as well. So that would be the thing about trust. Think about support. And creativity, yes, when you say you're creating well-being, you are all the time. In that sense, we are creating the world, our world, as we go. You know, that's what your brain is doing. It's taking in all of this stimulus from the outside, and it's creating our world and everything that goes in it. So in that sense, we are all creators. So when I'm talking about creativity here, I'm talking a more limited sense in terms of, okay, here we are, and I have this particular issue, problem, decision, whatever it might be. How am I going to solve it? And I need to do it in a good way, maybe a new way. I need to come up with something new, or I just want to come up with something new, or I'm a writer and I need to express myself creatively, whatever it might be. So a more limited context than creating well-being, which you do and we all do from our past. We're creating our present for, we hope, a better future. And it's worth remembering that only the present is real. The past was the present at some point, and the future will be the present at some point. But right now is the only moment that we can be creative. What else? Any other questions or comments? You can put them in the chat or in the Q&A.
No, there haven't been any new questions or comments.
Good heavens. Well, that's a bit disappointing. It either means that I've been really clear and interesting and everybody's going, wow, or more likely, I've been really confusing and people don't know where to start with their questions. I hope it's more of the former than the latter. But I hope this has been useful. What would be interesting for me is if you could put in the chat, first of all, what's been the most interesting and useful thing that you've heard in the last hour? And secondly, are you interested in the Creators Club? So I would ask you those two questions. So please, this would be helpful for me. If you could just type in, what's been the most interesting and useful part of this little webinar? And does the idea of Creators Club interesting for you? Thank you, Julieta. Thank you, Ludmilla. Okay. Hi, Benjamin. Give my regards to Hong Kong, one of my favorite cities. Thank you, Leo. Thanks, Ludmilla. Default mode network, yes. Anyone else? Okay. Last couple of minutes. Yes, creativity helps to produce more creativity. It's true. It is true. It kind of does bootstrap on itself. Okay, well, good. Thank you all. Been a pleasure to present here. I hope that I'll see some of you in the future. If you're interested here, just go and register. Just for the waiting list for the moment. There's no charge. There's no obligation or anything like that. It's just a register of interest, and we'll see how we go. Thank you all very much, and I wish you a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Joseph, and thank you to everyone else. You'll be receiving this recording via email. Have a great rest of the day or night, and see you in our next events. Take care. Bye-bye.